This is the history of the Ernest M. and Mabel P. Skinner family. Here is the story of Etta Mae Morgan, Chapter 2, pages 1 through 10.
The Autobiography of Etta Mae Morgan Skinner, narrated by Barbara Nilsson. I was born in Georgia at Fish Creek, Polk County on May 13, 1874. Fish Creek is not far from Rome, Georgia. The house in which I was born was built of logs and had 4 large rooms, 2 downstairs and 2 upstairs. It was a colonial-style home, and its location was very picturesque, situated on a large hill overlooking a small town. There were many beautiful trees and shrubbery native to that country. I was sent to this home to bless 2 noble souls whose hearts had been saddened by the loss of their firstborn baby 2 years before. I was nurtured most tenderly and caused my parents great concern because of the loss of their first baby, whom they loved so dearly. I grew rapidly and was a great comfort and joy to these dear parents. We lived at the above-described home for 3 years, and then we moved to one of the places on my grandfather's plantation. This was a most beautiful place, consisting of 1,600 acres of rich bottomland. It was still the home of many Negro families who, when freed, were not required to leave their home after slavery was abolished. Grandpa Morgan divided a lot of his land and gave the dear old Negroes enough for a home. He treated the Negroes very kindly, and they loved him dearly for it. I was now 5 years old and rather big for my age. I began my school life at this time. We lived 5 miles from the schoolhouse. The first day, my father took me, walking through the woods that had so many beautiful flowers. After the first trip, I had to go half of the way alone. Then a dear little cousin accompanied me the rest of the way. On my way, I had to pass several cabins of Negro families. They would run out with a hunk of bacon in hand and look at me strangely. I was frightened by them at first, but soon passed along without noticing them. I had a grand experience each morning, that of wandering through the oak grove and past Grandma's lovely home. It was like a mansion with flowers, cedars, and the lovely well with the weathercock flying in the breeze. I would drink of the water of that well and almost thought it was flavored with some sweet nectar. I would linger there, viewing the many grand sights. After this rest, I would wind my way through the long lanes to pass another grand colonial home where my little cousin lived. My cousin and I loved each other dearly. Together, we finished our walk to school. The dear teachers must have been wonderful, for they drew our thoughts from the beauty with which nature was filled on those parts. We were never late to school. We loved our teachers and never missed a day or hour, a compliment to the teachers. I was very happy in school and was promoted rapidly. I received my first and only punishment from my dear daddy at this time. My cousin and I would linger long at the beautiful home where we rested on our way home from school in the evening. There were so many things to draw our attention. This was a home planned for the comfort and joy of children. This special day we were in the vineyard after school. Grapes hung in great clusters from vines. We ate until we were suffering, but with songs of grand birds in there, no one could think of pain. The setting sun seemed to be racing to dip below the horizon, and all at once darkness appeared. I was afraid to walk home after dark. The little girl I loved so much went to her mother to see if I could stay all night. She said, "I don't think Aunt Jenny would care." Fun was our hobby. We played and swung and rode. Then we were called to supper, and we got ready and ate all we could, but not quite enough to please the mother of that home. My aunt had forgotten that we had eaten so many grapes. She prepared something quite dainty to get us to try to eat some more. Then we got ready for bed, for we sure had a hard day and were tired. Sleep came very soon, and nothing worried us. Early that morning, I heard a dear, sweet voice asking for his little girl. I was soon up and dressed. He was so sweet to me. We visited all the way home, talking of school and the beautiful scenery and listening to the sweet song of the birds. Time flew, and it seemed only minutes until we were home. Daddy went out behind the house and called me to him. I had forgotten I had done a wrong. He had not mentioned it to me before. He said, "My dear little girl, you may not realize that you caused your dear parents to be greatly worried by staying all night with your friend. Daddy was so tired he could not walk with you, but our hearts ached all night long." He showed me the keen little willow with which I was about to be punished. This was my first real punishment. My father talked so dear to me about being obedient and what a good girl I would grow up to be if I obeyed as I was told. I listened and was very sorry for what I had done. I told him I would never disobey him again, and I never did. Daddy took me near him and swished my skirts quite hard, and then he said, "That is enough for your life." Those kind of dear, thoughtful punishments are the ones that do the child the most good. We can see how it hurts our parents so much, too, and Heavenly Father feels badly as well as our earthly parents. That one punishment lasted me all my life. A kind word from him was all I ever needed. My school year closed at this time, and my grades were very satisfactory. I spent the summer with my loved ones at home, being my father's pal on every occasion I could. My brothers were 4 years younger than I, so I became my daddy's helper. I remember on his return from work at night, I would wait for him to eat his supper. I would sit in front of him and tell him everything that had happened during the day. He always laughed and said, "My reporter does a fine job." The people of the North cannot appreciate the beautiful scenery of the South and its influence upon youth. I learned to appreciate the beautiful songbirds and their beautiful songs. I also learned the many wildflowers and the ferns, as well as the wild fruit and berries. And oh, what fun we all had when gathering nuts. We stored them like the chipmunk does, only in greater quantities, and sacks upon sacks were stored upstairs for our fireplace evenings. We would crack nuts and read stories, and many were retold. Having been in the Civil War, our daddy had much to repeat for us children. During the Civil War, our father was wounded 5 times. His horse was shot from under him. He got 2 shots through the breast, and he had 1 through each ankle and 1 through the foot. He was left to die on the battlefield, but his old home remedy, turpentine, was one the boys in the army used. His turpentine was gone, so he asked a pal close to him if he had any turpentine. "Yes, boy, cling to it and use it freely." He began drinking it and began feeling better. The last visit was being made to the battlefield for the dead when they saw him moving, found him alive, and placed him in the carriage van and took him to the hospital. There he was treated for a long time, then released to be taken home. Daddy's dear mother had passed on before, and a dear sweet stepmother waited in his dear mother's place. When Daddy came home, he was near recovery. They all did what they could for his welfare. We children had a most wonderful time during the summer in the grand out-of-doors. The cotton fields were most beautiful, and we romped on piles of clean, white cotton after it was picked. We spent a lot of time listening to the Negroes sing as if they were birds merely warbling in the air. How they could sing without any training whatsoever. Their singing was most attractive, and all children of this clime should sing. There seems to be something wrong if they do not sing. Well, another school year arrived, and under more happy conditions, for my sister was school-age now, and I had company during my long walks. Our mother took very active part in school affairs. She taught when she was younger and realized what was required of a real teacher. Our speech was guarded, our actions were closely watched, our morals high, and our sports clean. So another year of school life had passed. We passed our grades satisfactorily again. Our father purchased a sawmill and owned a store where he took good care of his business. We were removed from town again. Our woods were filled with great and strong men who were chopping cordwood to burn after it was placed in a stack. It was covered with green boughs, and then dirt covered that. An opening at the bottom of the stack for fire and one at the top caused a slow draft that burned long and slow. When limbs had reached a state of charcoal, the fire was put out, and when cold enough, it was raked down and hauled to a loading place, sold, and shipped for a good price. My school year began again, and this time I had to go alone, as it was too far for my little sister to walk. I had to go through the thick timber and past many Negroes who did all the cutting of this timber. The men treated me as a little lady, always kind and good to me. I would stop and listen to their singing. It sounded like a great chorus being led by some renowned leader. The accompanist was their heavy axes that beat time to perfection by swinging to and fro. It is beyond my description. My steps were very slow, so I could listen to such heavenly music. My school did not interest me as much this year. Music seemed to carry my thoughts away. The year was soon gone, it seemed, and Daddy moved to his sawmill again. This time, Mother and we children lived in town. Our year was very successful, and I gained a lot over the many hard years I had gone. I had a very close call this year, as many mad dogs were raging and school children were watched carefully by police. Horns were blown and children were supposed to scamper for shelter. We were so near our home this time, we ran up to the big porch, and the dog ran under the porch. Hearing the noise, our mama came quickly and took us in the house. The dog ran down the street and bit one of our little friends. She died 2 days after. We all felt so bad about losing our little pal. We as a family could not appreciate the guiding hand of our Heavenly Father. If it had not been for His protection, several of us could have been bitten. How humble we all should be for the protecting hand of our Heavenly Father. This time in our lives was one of trying and testing. The evil one was near us many times, though we could not see. My baby brother about this time was out playing with us children and developed a rash from the poison ivy that grew in all the woods and near the yard in that section. He was very sick and nearly died. One day a little girl came to our home and knocked at the door. Mama answered it. The little girl said, "A lady downtown told me you needed some help." Mama said she did need help and invited the girl in. She went to work, and Mama liked her very much. She was timid, as she had been away from her home for a while. Callie acted very strange. She had a small parcel, and when Mama told her to put her things in the bedroom, she continually went in there, and my mother could not understand why. So one day, Mama sent her some distance away to look for something. While she was gone, Mama went into her room, looked all over, and could not find a thing. She looked under the bed, and away out of sight she saw a black parcel. When she reached for it and opened it, she found a ragged old dress wrapped around a book. She opened the book, and the title said, "The Book of Mormon." Mama had never heard of such a book. She wrapped it up carefully and put it back. When Callie came back, Mama said, "I have done something you may be cross about, but please don't be. I am so crazy to read that book. I had such a funny feeling while holding that book." Callie was so excited and said, "Oh, my lady, I don't want you to read it. You will treat me like my mother and father did. They drove me from my home because I would not burn it. I grabbed the book and ran away from home and have not been back since. All my family acted the same to me and my friends." My mother said, "I shall love you if you will let me read it, and you have a home here as long as you want." The dear little girl was so afraid to let my mother read it, for she thought everybody hated her because of the book. Mama kept on pleading, but the girl could not see how anybody else would want to read the book when her own mother wanted to burn it. Mama told her she would not be harmed and perhaps receive a great blessing. The girl went in under the bed, got her book, and trembling took it to my mother, asking her to promise that no harm would come to the book or her. The girl went under the bed, got her book, and trembling, she took it to my mother, asking her to promise that no harm would come to her book or her. Mama read night and day while she tended the baby, who was so good while she read, and the baby commenced getting better. How my mother sorrowed for this little girl, all alone in the world. She drank in every word she read as if a thirst had been quenched. When she finished reading the book, she asked the girl where she might find some of the men, missionaries, she had told Mama about. Callie told her to write to President John Morgan at Chattanooga, Tennessee. He would tell her what to do. Mama did as she was told. Elder Morgan was then president of the Southern States Mission. She wrote and told Mama to read the literature he was sending her. He also said soon he would send 2 elders to visit us. She read and wanted more to read. She told Daddy about it, and he began to read too, and became a believer as well. Not long after, 2 elders came to visit us, and we were all so glad to see them, since we had been waiting for them for such a long time. The elders were Elder Neil Gardner of Spanish Fork, Utah, and Elder Thomas H. Robbins of Kaysville, Utah. Mama told them she was ready for baptism, but the elders told her to wait for her dear husband. They told her to teach the great truths to him that she found in the Book of Mormon. My father sat a while longer and read more, but he told them he had no objection to Mama being baptized. So after dark one evening, Mama, Papa, and we children went to a pond near our home, and Elder Gardner baptized my dear mother on July 31st, 1885. She made our home a place where the elders could rest and preach the gospel to all her fine neighbors. They did this as long as she lived in that part of the South. Mama was a Mormon before she read the Book of Mormon that belonged to the dear little girl. She was a true descendant of the children of Israel. Several months from the time my mother was baptized, my father, William Harrison Morgan, my sister Fanny, and I were baptized by Elder William Spry of Salt Lake City, Utah. That was November 16th, 1885. We were all very happy and sincere in our belief. My father moved again farther from his folks, now that they were so opposed to the church. Mama's folks lived in Tennessee. We were called to face many hardships due to being baptized Mormons. The devil surely started to make a great fuss, but it only made our faith grow stronger and gave us strength to live the gospel. One incident which took place at our home was when two elders came to visit us on their way to their place of abode. They had gone into town to get the mail, and everybody began to make fun of the elders and told them to leave the country. The elders came home and said, "Sister Morgan, trouble will be brewing before morning, you will see." They took their suitcases and left for the woods to sleep. Sky was their cover and leaves their bed. Night brought its horror. Men dressed in funny garb, handkerchiefs over their faces. They swore and cursed Mama, told her if they ever found those men in her house again, she would swing from the limb of a tree. They rummaged through the house but found no one. Mama was not scared. She had such faith in the Lord and in His power. This was her motto: "The Lord watches over His own." We children were pretty frightened of such a sight of these wicked men cursing God with every breath. I was nearly 12 years old, and my schooling had been interfered with due to joining the Mormon Church. My mother worried over her children, as they were all she had. We were very poor. My father had been wounded in the Civil War, and he was never able to work as he would have liked. He was always changing employment and looking for better opportunities. My mother's home was a resting place for any and all elders. Once a group came there to rest. One of them was Elder Heber C. Rich. He took a liking to me and asked Mama to let me come to Idaho and stay with his mother, Emmeline Grover, the wife of Apostle Charles C. Rich. She was a midwife and traveled a lot and left me to do the work and take care of the boys at home. This was hard for me to do since Mama had not taught me kitchen work yet. My mother had a great sacrifice to make, and few mothers would attempt such a task. Schooling, music, and knowledge of the gospel were to be my reward if I went to Paris, Idaho. My future home was so many, many miles away from my loved ones, and how their hearts must have ached for their dear little girl among total strangers. I was 12 in May and landed in Paris on March 7, 1886. I had never been away from home overnight before, and always lived in the country and had only a few people with whom to mingle. Therefore, I was very timid and unlearned. My southern brogue hindered me. My hours were full of sorrow, and I wept many tears, but was brave enough when writing to my dear parents. I kept all my sorrows to myself and learned to fight my way alone and developed a fine character. I was very much loved by many friends that I made in Paris. I found many things represented by Elder Rich were not as imagined, but I was careful of him and his mother. I was guided in life and chose good company, and was careful of the activities in which I took part, and gained many good and noble friends. My preparation for coming out west was begun. I was able to make my clothes, and we all worked to get me ready to leave for Idaho. No one can ever imagine how those dear parents could stand to see me leave on such a long trip entirely alone. I traveled by railroad passenger car with other Mormon immigrants leaving for the west. My mother got a nice large basket with 2 lids and filled it with food enough for 7 days. It took that much time to travel from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Paris, Idaho. The hour of the parting arrived, and not a tear was shed. All were blessing me for going to Zion. Their faith was unmatched by any class of people. My father and I walked most of the way to Chattanooga. We hired someone to haul my trunk. We talked and enjoyed our walk very much all the way. We all looked forward to being in Zion in the West, where love and kindness was their motto. The train was ready to roll. I got the last embrace from my dear daddy. I never saw him again. As I look back on the past, I cringe to think of the courage these dear ones had, and the beauties they could see in the gospel. No one will ever know how lonely I felt when I was alone. As the meal hour approached, I sought a lovely spot to eat. I sat alone in the passenger car, never speaking to a soul. I was afraid of so many people. At night, we still sat in our seats, no pillows or blankets. Few have ever read of such hardships as we went through, let alone experienced them. I became sleepy and tired, but rest was impossible. When we reached American Fork, an elder came to me and said, "Little girl, wouldn't you like to get off here and stay a day or two and get some rest?" I was afraid to do that, but the people insisted I do so and get some rest. I did as I was told. On arriving at the home of the elder, there was a hearing for 2 young people who had committed sin. I was so frightened I'd never heard of such behavior, and to be committed in Zion? I found there was more sin here than in the South. This put me on my guard, and I had to be careful of my actions, no matter where I was, a great lesson to learn while very young. I was anxious to go on and soon left for Ogden, as President Benjamin E. Rich had told those who had charge of me to let me stop at Ogden and visit his wife, Diana Farr, for a few days. She was a perfect lady. She met me at the train and was just like a mother to me. She coaxed me to stay with her, but I was being sent to Paris and had to go where I was sent, a blessing in disguise and the guiding hand of my Heavenly Father, no doubt. I left this dear home for my last stop on the trip. I arrived in Montpelier March 7th, 1886. Snow was 4 feet deep. In Georgia, I had never seen snow. On arriving in Paris, the driver drove right over a picket fence. The snow was so deep. When we got to the door of the house, I was so afraid and cold, never having felt cold before. There were 4 grown men in the family. Mrs. Charles C. Rich, Emmeline Grover, was an older lady, but a very busy woman. She was gone so much to attend to every mother who had a baby born within a radius of 50 or 75 miles from her home. I was left alone and did not know how to cook or do any kitchen chores. I was soon educated along those lines and could do everything from chopping wood to milking cows. Even with all the work, I was very lonely for my folks, and many a morning my pillow was wet from shedding tears of loneliness. However, I managed to keep this sorrow from my dear folks, and it was a blessing that I did, for they were sorrowing for me too, and all my letters to them were full of comfort and cheer. I learned to be brave while young and to stand up for my rights. The 4 boys in this family were splendid teachers. I learned from them how to cook, bake bread, and wash dishes. They began to teach me how to stop using my Southern brogue, and although I loved it, I tried to forget this brogue in order to please them. They were quite harsh in contrast to my parents, who were always patient and kind. I had to learn to accept this training and to face the problems of the world alone. My life was greatly affected by this life the first few years in Zion. I do not have a loving nature as my mother and the other children in our family. I took life in a serious way, always strict and defensive. Mrs. Rich paid me a great compliment later in my life, which I was very proud. She said, "I never heard Etta May say a word back to me in all the time that I knew her, and she was a most obedient girl. I shall ever look upon her as a real lady and an example to all with whom she associates." My father could not stand it any longer, and in the spring of 1887, he and Mama talked it over and decided she must come be with me. He would remain and sell his sawmill and come a little later. His people were so opposed to Mama and her religion. They did all in their power to keep him from coming to Mama and his dear children. On the 1st of March, 1887, I had a long letter from my mother and father telling me Mama was coming to see me and bringing all the children, 2 younger sons and another daughter, Fanny. The boys were George Lester, 7 years of age, and Emmett Earnest, the baby, who was only 4 years old. This was a real mother, willing to face pioneer life, the cold and the snow, for the love she had for her oldest child, meaning me. We were very happy to be together for only a few hours. I had never had the privilege of living at home again. I had to get a job and earn enough money to go to school. I did housework all the time. One with whom I spent much time was Mrs. Hiram Woolley, the former Minerva Marion Rich, who had a lovely home in Paris and a nice family. I also worked at Blackfoot, where Mr. Woolley was the manager of a livestock ranch. I cooked for the men, Mrs. Woolley, and the family too, which made my responsibility very heavy.